is that only one really rose to the challenge. Disappointment for Alex Eala. It's been a good tournament for her. Moving inside the world's top 30 for the first time in her career. But it's Noskova who moves on. A simply devastating display of attacking brilliance. It's the better of Eala. 6-2, 6-love to make the quarterfinals.
Pretty much everything right when you think of it. I mean, there was one glitch when she was at 40-15 on her serve. You know, Eala was coming back, but...
Stop. Don't scroll. Don't blink. Don't breathe for a second. Freeze exactly where you are. Because the story you're being told right now about Alexandra Eala and Linda Nosková is not the truth. It's a carefully polished, television-friendly illusion. Mainstream sports broadcasters are already rushing to their studios, smiling into the camera, reading from teleprompters, and confidently declaring that the Eala hype train has finally crashed. They are pointing to one number 6-2, 6-0, and presenting it as undeniable proof that the fairy tale is over. But what you're seeing on that scoreboard is not the full story. Not even close. Because if you actually dig beneath the surface, if you examine the context, the pressure, and the statistical absurdity of what happened on that court, you begin to realize something much more unsettling for the establishment. This match was not the end of a revolution. The IT was the moment that proved just how terrified the old guard truly is. According to the sanitized version being pushed across sports networks, the story is simple. The rising Filipina prodigy Alexandra Eala finally ran into a stronger, more experienced opponent in Linda Nosková, the 14th seed from the Czech Republic. The commentators will calmly explain that Eala's magical run was impressive, but inevitable reality eventually arrived. They will say Noskova exposed the weaknesses. They will say the scoreline proves the gap between hype and reality. And just like that, the system returns to normal, comfort restored, hierarchy protected, order maintained. But if you rewind the timeline just 48 hours, the entire picture changes. 2 days earlier, Alexandra Eala walked onto the court and did something that shook the entire tennis ecosystem. She dismantled Coco Gauff. Not just a routine victory. Not just a lucky upset. That IT was a psychological demolition. The reigning U.S. Open champion, one of the most heavily marketed stars in women's tennis, looked rattled, uncomfortable, and completely out of rhythm. Rally after rally, Eala absorbed the pressure, redirected the pace, and forced one of the sport's biggest names into visible frustration. The result wasn't just another match result. IT was a warning shot. Because when a 20-year-old qualifier from the Philippines suddenly walks through one of the sport's biggest names with fearless composure, the entire competitive hierarchy starts asking uncomfortable questions. And that's when the tension begins. Next up stood Linda Nosková, a talented player, yes, a dangerous one on any given day. But what happened in that round of 16 match wasn't just a normal contest between two rising stars. IT was a pressure cooker. Noskova walked onto that court knowing exactly what was happening across the tour. Every coach, every analyst, every veteran in the locker room had already seen what Eala had just done. And when players sense a rising threat in professional sports, the response is almost instinctive. You stop the momentum immediately. You don't allow the underdog narrative to grow. You shut it down before it spreads. Now look carefully at the statistics from the match, because they're where the real story hides. The headline number is almost unbelievable: 81% of second serve points won by Noskova. Pause for a second and think about that. In professional tennis, the second serve is supposed to be the vulnerable moment. It's the point where the returner attacks. It's the moment where rallies begin and momentum can shift. Even elite servers across the tour often hover around 50 to 55% success on second serve. But 81%, that's not just strong, that's nearly unheard of. Add the rest of the numbers, and the picture becomes even stranger. 77% first serve points, 7 aces, 0 double faults, 56 total points, 1 to Eala's 26 on paper. It looks like total domination. But experienced tennis analysts notice something else. Numbers like that don't usually happen casually. They happen when a player produces the match of their life. Anyone who has watched professional tennis long enough understands this phenomenon. Sometimes a player enters a zone so sharp, so fearless, that every shot lands within inches of a line. Risky returns clip the sideline. Second serves explode through the box. Aggressive forehands somehow stay inside the baseline that it's not sustainable. It's not predictable. But for one match, under extreme pressure, it can happen. And that is exactly what this performance looked like. Linda Nosková didn't just play well. She played fearlessly. Every second serve carried pace and aggression. Every rally seemed to end with a winner or a forced error. IT wasn't conservative tennis, that IT was high-risk, high-reward execution. Because that level of performance tells us something important, that if an opponent must produce near-perfect tennis to shut down a rising player, that rising player isn't finished, they're dangerous. The match didn't reveal the ceiling of Alexandra Eala. IT revealed the level opponents must reach just to stop her momentum. And that's a very different narrative from the one currently circulating. Young players in tennis rarely dominate immediately. Even legends faced brutal scorelines early in their careers while learning how to handle the pressure of big stages and elite opponents. Matches like this become part of the growth curve. The experience gained from facing players performing at their absolute peak becomes fuel for the next stage of development. And if the past few days proved anything, it's that Alexandra Eala already has the mentality to compete with the sport's biggest names. She defeated Coco Gauff. She forced a top-seeded opponent to produce extraordinary numbers to stop her run. For a 20-year-old still climbing the rankings, that is not failure. That is a signal that, the next time you see the scoreboard 6-2, 6-0. Remember that numbers without context can be misleading, because sometimes a dominant scoreline hides something else entirely. Sometimes it reveals the exact moment when the rest of the field realizes a new challenger has arrived. And if the reaction across the tennis world is any indication, the rise of Alexandra Eala is far from finished. In fact, this match may be remembered for a completely different reason. Not as the night the story ended, but as the night the tour realized just how dangerous the next chapter could be. Take a breath for a moment, because what just happened on that court is going to be debated, dissected, and misunderstood for a very long time. On the surface, the scoreboard tells a brutally simple story. 6-2, 6-0, a dominant win for Linda Nosková and a crushing defeat for Alexandra Eala. That is the version of events that will circulate across highlight shows, social media clips, and post-match commentary panels. Analysts will glance at the box score, nod their heads, and confidently declare that the magical run has come to an abrupt end. But tennis, especially at the highest level, rarely fits neatly into a two-number narrative. Because behind that scoreboard lies a story of exhaustion, risk, survival, and a young athlete pushing the absolute limits of what her body could endure. And if you look closely enough, the match reveals far more than a simple loss. Start with the performance of Linda Nosková. This particular night, under the bright lights and enormous pressure of a major stage, she played a brand of tennis that can only be described as fearless. Her numbers were extraordinary. 81% of second serve points, won 77% of first serve points, won 7 aces, 0 double faults. For context, second serves are normally the most vulnerable moment in a player's service game. Even elite servers on the professional tour typically hover around 50 to 55% success on second serve against top-tier opponents. But Noskova was operating in a different zone entirely. Her second serve wasn't cautious. It wasn't conservative. It was aggressive. She took risks, drove the ball deep, and committed fully to every point. It was the kind of high-variance, high-risk strategy that can either collapse spectacularly or produce a match that feels almost unstoppable. On this day, those risks paid off. Every line seemed to open for her. Every aggressive strike landed just inside the boundaries. The rhythm built point after point, game after game, until the momentum felt irreversible. Professional athletes sometimes describe this state as playing in the zone when timing, confidence, and adrenaline merge into something that feels nearly automatic. For Noskova, this was one of those performances. But to truly understand the match, you have to look at the other side of the net. Because the real story is written in the numbers belonging to Alexandra Eala. At first glance, they look disappointing. 57% first serve percentage, 36% points won on first serve, 56% points won on second serve. Commentators might call a drop in form. Some might even say she collapsed under pressure. But that interpretation ignores the extraordinary physical journey she had already completed before stepping onto that court. For nearly 2 weeks in the California desert, Alexandra Eala had been fighting through one of the most demanding stretches of her young career. Unlike many seeded players who begin directly in the main draw, she first had to navigate the qualifying rounds. Qualifying matches are often brutal. The margins are small, the opponents are hungry, and the conditions can be unforgiving. She fought through those matches just to earn a place in the tournament. Then came the main draw. More matches, longer rallies, rising stakes. The desert conditions added another layer of difficulty. Hard courts under intense sunlight drain energy quickly. Even small dips in stamina can change the outcome of entire sets. Through all of that, she kept winning, and then came the moment that electrified the entire tournament. Only 48 hours earlier, Alexandra Eala stepped onto the court against one of the sport's brightest stars, Coco Gauff. The match carried enormous attention. Gauff is not just a top-ranked player. She is also the reigning champion of the U.S. Open, one of tennis's most prestigious tournaments. Facing a player of that caliber can be intimidating even for experienced professionals. But Eala played with extraordinary composure. Her game plan was clear: heavy topspin, patient rallies, and relentless pressure from the baseline. She absorbed Gauff's pace, redirected it, and gradually took control of the exchanges. The victory sent shockwaves through the tournament. For fans in the Philippines, it was a historic moment. For neutral tennis observers, it was confirmation that new talent had arrived. But that triumph came at a cost. Elite tennis matches are not just mental battles, they are physical marathons. The intensity required to defeat a top-ranked opponent can drain every reserve of energy from the body. Adrenaline surges during key moments. Muscles fire repeatedly under explosive stress. The nervous system stays locked in a constant state of alertness. After such a match, recovery becomes the greatest challenge. Professional players rely on ice baths, physiotherapy, stretching routines, and nutrition to restore their bodies between matches. Even with those tools, sometimes the tank simply runs low. And when Alexandra Eala stepped onto the court to face Linda Nosková, the signs of that exhaustion began to show. In tennis, fatigue rarely announces itself dramatically. Instead, it appears in small details. Serves lose a few kilometers per hour of pace. Footwork slows slightly during long rallies. Shots that normally land deep begin to fall a few inches shorter. Those small differences can shift momentum rapidly against an opponent playing aggressively. Eala's first serve percentage dropped to 57%, noticeably lower than in her previous match. Her first serve win rate fell to 36%. These numbers weren't just statistics. They were signals of a player pushing through physical exhaustion. And across the net stood an opponent delivering one of the most aggressive service performances of the tournament. Momentum in tennis can be brutal. Once a player finds rhythm and confidence, games can accumulate quickly. That's exactly what happened when Linda Nosková surged through the match with a run of 9 consecutive games. The first set closed 6-2. The second set unfolded even faster, ending 6-0. For any athlete, facing that kind of run can feel overwhelming. But what happened next reveals something important about the mindset of Alexandra Eala. When players fall behind by a large margin, reactions vary. Some show visible frustration, some rush points and lose focus. Others struggle to maintain composure. But throughout the final stretch of the match, Eala remained steady. She continued stepping to the baseline, preparing for each return and fighting for every point available. She ultimately won 26 total points in the match. That number may seem small compared with her opponent's 56, but each of those points required effort from a body already pushed to its limits. Against a server winning 81% of second serve points, even creating return opportunities becomes extremely difficult. Yet she continued competing until the final ball was struck when a match ended. The ritual that defines tennis followed. Both players walked toward the net. Alexandra Eala and Linda Nosková exchanged a handshake, a simple gesture that carries deep meaning in the sport. Win or lose tennis, players acknowledge the battle they have just shared. Moments like this reflect the values taught throughout the sport's development systems: including the academy founded by Rafael Nadal in Mallorca. That academy emphasizes not only technical skill, but also resilience, discipline, and respect for opponents. For players trained in that environment, perseverance is part of the identity. Every athlete's career includes matches that feel painful in the moment but prove valuable later. Losses expose weaknesses. They reveal the areas where conditioning, strategy, or recovery routines must improve. For a young player like Alex Eala, this tournament offered several lessons at once: the stamina required to navigate qualifying rounds and deep tournament runs, the challenge of facing top 15 opponents at peak performance, the importance of physical recovery between high-intensity matches. These lessons are not setbacks. They are part of the developmental process that shapes long-term champions. Point 1 result, no matter how decisive, rarely defines a career. Tennis history is filled with players who suffered heavy defeats early in their journeys before eventually reaching the highest levels of the sport. For Alexandra Eala, the experience gained during this tournament will likely become a valuable reference point. She now understands the pace, aggression, and stamina required to challenge players ranked among the world's best. She also experienced firsthand the physical demands of playing multiple high-stakes matches in a short period of time. Those insights can shape training decisions moving forward. While the scoreboard may appear harsh, the broader context tells a different story. In the span of 2 weeks, a young athlete from the Philippines survived the qualifying rounds, defeated top competition, earned global attention by beating Coco Gauff, reached the later stages of a major tournament. For any player early in their professional journey, that is a remarkable achievement. And tournaments like this often become the foundation for future breakthroughs. Sports narratives tend to simplify complex moments. Point 1 match becomes proof of success or failure. One scoreline becomes the headline. But when you look deeper at what happened on that court, the reality is far more nuanced. Linda Nosková delivered an exceptional performance filled with fearless aggression. Alexandra Eala battled through fatigue after an exhausting tournament run. Both players demonstrated the qualities that make professional tennis so compelling: skill, determination, and resilience under pressure. The match may have ended with a lopsided score, but the story of Alexandra Eala is far from finished. For rising athletes, moments like this are rarely the end of the journey. More often, they are simply the beginning of the next